All right, welcome back to Wisdom Teachings. I'm your host, David Wilcock. Boy, do we have a show for you. This stuff that we've been talking about with Dr. Alexey Dmitriev, it was one of the biggest game changer moments of my entire life. And I am going to be taking you through even more of his groundbreaking paper, Planetophysical State of the Earth and Life. An unassuming name, if ever there was one, but the underlying model of what he put forward is so groundbreaking that even now, there could not be anything more relevant. And in this episode, I'm going to focus on, in part of the episode, a specific point that he makes about a strange comet that showed up in 1994 called Shoemaker-Levy 9, and it became the 9 after it broke up into 9 pieces in Jupiter's orbit. And it actually crashed into the planet Jupiter, and in so doing created quite a light show and some very, very unexpected effects, showing the awesome amount of energy that is coursing into our solar system as we head towards the big solar flash, which is the trigger for our ascension. This material gives us a very valid benchmark from which to assess ancient prophecies about a coming golden age and a solar flash, which appears to have a DNA and consciousness activating property. We're not just looking at something that is written about in ancient prophecies, we're looking at something with remarkably provable scientific information. And to me, that's where we start to get into the really interesting stuff. We're no longer having to say, take my word for it. We're no longer having to say, oh, I believe Corey that he actually was in the space program, or that he's in contact with blue avians, or he's in contact with inner Earth priestesses, or whoever. This is real science. But the point is, you're going to see more and more convergence between what we've been talking about in cosmic disclosure and the actual scientific data. And the benefit for me really is that I've had this knowledge since December of 2000. And even all the way back at the very beginning of when I started to do professional level public lectures with computer-generated slides, I was already talking about this phenomenon way back then. This paper completely changed my life. So without further ado, let's get right back into it here. Interplanetary climate change really was put on the map by Dr. Alexey Dmitriev, as we've been saying, and this paper, he wrote it in 1997, and it was translated in 1998. You can still find it, it's still online right there at the Millennium Group website. And again, he's got very serious scientific credentials. This is not just some fringe guy. He is an expert on fast processing Earth events, meaning things that change very quickly on Earth. And it was out there in 1998, and it wasn't for 3 years before I found it, because it was the end of 2000. So we're going to just jump right back into where we left off in the previous episode. He's talking about a change in our entire solar system. And that change gets us right back into where we were. So he says that as a result of this solar system transformation, new deeper qualities of life itself may come forth, bringing the new physical state of the Earth to an equilibrium with the new organismic possibilities of development, reproduction, and perfection. So he's very much talking about an ascension or an evolution of humanity. In this sense, it is evident that we are faced with a problem of the adaptation of humanity to this new state of the Earth. New conditions on Earth whose biospheric qualities are varying and non-uniformly distributed. Now, one of the most recent brief video called Antarctic Atlantis, at the time of this taping, it's already about to hit 400,000 views. We were talking in there very briefly, I only mentioned it in passing, that his insiders asked me to tell everyone they're getting ready to tell us, they meaning the government or whatever aspect of the military that represents, they're getting ready to tell us that the sun is going to do something dramatic. And they think that we're not going to survive it unless we take very elaborate precautions. And so in a sense, if they do this, it would likely cause some sort of mass panic. So you could understand why this type of data that Dmitriev is putting together might be suppressed by the Western governments. They don't want to disrupt their power structure. They also don't want to give credibility to religion, because even these guys that have gone over to the Alliance, that used to be cabal, they have a pretty ambivalent attitude about religion, to say the least. It's not like they've suddenly gone into some religious belief. So they feel that if this were to be publicly known, that people would start expecting end times, they'd start looking for rapture, they might convert, they might want to become Christian or Muslim or Buddhist, and they also see that that would mean that you would have less ability to control the narrative. But again, the problem is they are controlling the narrative, and the problem is that if we were allowed to know the truth, we would be aware that this change was coming our way, we would have extraterrestrials that would already be helping us, and we would be aware that everybody can be saved. We don't need to worry about this because we have lots of collaborators out there. The prophecies in ancient times talk about things like Noah's Ark that allow us to get through this without a problem. It's just sort of like staying indoors when there's a big storm and you don't want to be out there driving in that stuff. Well, that's a good option. And so this is one of those areas where these type of changes require us to collaborate with people who are already here and have a lot more technology than we do. Whatever our own government can do, they don't have enough resources to be able to keep everybody underground. There's not enough bases, there's not enough space. So it's a very challenging and complex dilemma for them. And again, the philosophy of what we're talking about, the whole discussion is framed scientifically. So if you think that this is just pseudoscience, bear in mind that NASA is putting out all the data. In later episodes, I'm going to show you the NASA proof, not just Russian science, but NASA proof that this is going to happen. So it's a very, very interesting and controversial discussion. Let's keep reading what Dmitriev has to say. Each living representative on Earth will be getting a thorough examination or quality control inspection to determine its ability to comply with these new conditions. That's pretty intense. These evolutionary challenges always require effort or endurance, be it individual organisms, species, or communities. So even apart from the idea that there could be some sort of solar flash, we're already dealing with a world where in the 20 years since he wrote this paper, we've seen a very significant acceleration of geological instability. We're seeing unpredictable weather changes. We had this enormous drought in California that just ended. I was living in California, as you know, through the whole thing. It was horrible. So many animals died, so many trees died, and we didn't even know if it was ever going to stop. And it was a shot across the bow showing us that things are changing and it's not necessarily safe. Everybody in California was starting to wonder, trees died, and we didn't even know if it was ever going to stop. And it was a shot across the bow showing us that things are changing and it's not necessarily safe. Everybody in California was starting to wonder if we're even going to be able to stay there because you got these huge water restrictions. It was very intense. So it is absolutely an adaptive challenge. We have to be ready for things that we wouldn't have thought of before. And in law of one terms, these changes that the Earth goes through are intended to wake us up. They're intended to get us to have to work together and to see that things on Earth as they are not healthy. That we have a sick world, that we have a planet that has malfunctioning rhythms, and we need to do something to help enhance our safety and our security. So with that said, let's keep reading. Therefore, it is not only the climate that is becoming new, but we as human beings are experiencing a global change in the vital processes of living organisms or life itself, which is yet another link in the total process. We cannot treat such things separately or individually, and that again is just like what you hear in the law of one, that this is all interconnected, it's all holographic, the macro and the micro are unified. Let's go on. We shall list the recent large-scale events in the solar system in order to fully understand and comprehend the planetophysical transformations taking place. This development of events, as it has become clear in the last few years, is being caused by material and energetic non-uniformities in anisotropic interstellar space. And the reason why I opened up with Merav Ofer's study about the interstellar medium And the very unexpected energetic surge of magnetism that Voyager found out there is because this is his geek speak way of talking about the energy cloud, this higher zone of energy that we're moving into. So we started out with some scientific proof from NASA when they finally admitted it in 2009. Now we're going to see, in Dmitriev's terms, and a lot of this did come from Russian studies, how this is affecting our solar system all across the board. It's quite fascinating. Let's continue. In its travel through interstellar space, the heliosphere travels in the direction of the solar apex in the Hercules constellation. On its way, it has met, since the 1960s, basically an energy cloud, but here's how he's going to describe it, non-homogeneities. Homogeneous means that it's the same everywhere. It's the same all around. So we would expect space to be homogeneous. As we move through space, it's always going to be the same. But this cloud is non-homogeneous, right? So don't get trapped up in the words. It's just a very elegant way of saying something simple. So let's go on. Beginning in the 1960s, we've been going into a non-homogeneous area of matter and energy in space in which we find these highly charged particles of hydrogen, helium, and hydroxyl, in addition to other elements and combinations. Now remember, the bow shock is the area at the leading edge of our heliosphere. It's the intersection with this cloud that's now showing up, as according to what he said, since the 1960s when they began detecting it. And the bow shock has had some really remarkable changes, and this is unfortunately one of the ones that he comes up with that we've never really been able to find NASA data to verify. This is something that, remember, the Russians had their own space program. They've had their own, they actually were the first one to get a geosynchronous, their own measuring systems, and this is one that NASA didn't catch, or if they did, they're sure as heck not going to let us know for reasons I was describing. But the Russians, through Dmitriev, did tell us a stunning piece of information proving the existence of this energy cloud. Let's take a look. The heliosphere's transition through this energetic structure has led to an increase of the shock wave in front of the solar system from 3 or 4 astronomical units, that's the distance from the Earth to the Sun, from 3 to 4 AU to 40 AU or more. Do you realize what he's saying there? He's saying there has been a 1,000% or more increase in the size of this hot zone at the front of the solar system. So I want you to think about that and meditate on the gravity of what we're saying here. Now, if you are, as I said in previous episodes, coming in for a landing with a space shuttle to Earth, you got to put those heat tiles on the shuttle because the more atmosphere you hit, the hotter it gets. You get more friction. Friction leads to heat. Well, think about this. We're talking about a 1,000% or 10 times increase in the amount of friction at the front of our heliosphere. That means, arguably, that the density of the energy has gone 10 times higher. That's an incredible, incredible thing. And it's one of those things that you have to say, my God, it's unconscionable that we haven't been told, because, think about it. If this is actually real, and it obviously is, we're talking about science, these are irrefutable facts. Don't you think that you should know about this? Don't you think that if there is going to be some kind of ascension that validates Christianity, that validates Islam, that validates Buddhism, that validates Hinduism, that validates Judaism, every Christianity that validates Islam, that validates Buddhism, that validates Hinduism, that validates Judaism, every religion, every ancient spiritual tradition is getting you ready for this? The book of Daniel in the Old Testament, it's everywhere. Okay? Egyptian prophecy, Zoroastrian prophecy, everything. Shouldn't you know so you can be ready? Well, they don't want to tell you because So what do? They put out movies like 2001 and 2010 with Arthur C. Clarke, where they kind of tell you in a symbolic way, right? Because Commander David Bowman at the end of 2001 goes into the monolith, and then that takes him through some sort of portal experience, and he comes out as the Star Child. As a spontaneous human evolution. They tell you about the ancient builder race. They show you the monolith. Then in 2010, Arthur C. Clarke's next book, you have Jupiter suddenly transform, and that actually appears to be what they were trying to do with Shoemaker-Levy 9. If I can get to that, if I don't stop talking, I'm never going to make it there. Let's keep going. This shock wave thickening has led to a plasma overdraft around the solar system, and then that plasma is breaking through into the interplanetary domain. So this means that whatever's happening to the planets, the heating that we see, in his model, they're all energetically interconnected. And this goes very nicely with the electric universe model put out there by Wallace Thornhill, his website thunderbolts.info. That's a very similar concept. It's basically the same thing, the idea that electrical connections are much more important than we think, and the whole solar system is actually functioning as one giant circuit in one sense. So if you start pumping more energy into the circuit, it's the same thing as if you tried to plug in your power outlet, but the power outlet is now, so this is the view of the bow shock here, and we're seeing how that glow is increasing 10 times. It's 10 times longer, 40 AU now, and it's probably gotten even longer. Some estimates are it's now up to 100 AU in length, so it's really, really changing. And then we see things like solar activity. So this is an old NASA animation that I found of sunspot activity, and it's just meant to show that things really can go blasting out of the sun as this energy comes in. He talks about the idea that this creates an energy donation. This breakthrough constitutes a kind of matter and energy donation made by interplanetary space to our solar system. In response to this donation of energy and matter, we have observed a number of large-scale events. There has been a growth of dark spots on Pluto, reporting of aurora phenomena on Saturn. We're going to go way more into all this stuff later. Reporting of Uranus and Neptune pole shifts. They are magnetically conjugate planets. I was able to prove that that's true. And the abrupt large-scale growth of Uranus's magnetic field. A change in light intensity and light spot dynamics on Neptune. There's a lot more than just that, but he is correct. The doubling of the magnetic field intensity on Jupiter based on 1992 data. Doubling? That's incredible. Again, all this we're going to go in through much more detail later. And a series of new states and processes observed on this planet as an aftermath of a series of explosions in July 1994 caused by comet Shoemaker-Levy 9. Okay, I had to speed up a little bit to make sure we were going to get to this in one episode because I could talk about this stuff for a long time. This is a really, really fascinating one. It's one of those things that he talked about, and I was dying to see more. And I went online, and sure enough, I was able to validate that some really incredible things happen. Really, really fascinating one. It's one of those things that he talked about, and I was dying to see more. And I went online, and sure enough, I was able to validate that some really incredible things happened as a result of this comet. So now we're going to talk about that a little bit. That is a relaxation of a plasmoid train. Okay, stop right there. What the heck is that? The plasmoid train is the comet, okay? He's saying that the comet is generating plasma, and a train just means a long string of fragments of which, as I said, because it's called Shoemaker-Levy 9, there's 9 fragments or 9 cars in the train. And they were glowing, and he equates that with plasma. Conventional physics may not. But he's looking at everything in our solar system being so highly energized by going into this cloud that's now 1,000 times more intense, that we're having any type of thing like this where a comet collides with a planet, that becomes a much bigger deal. So let's keep reading. A relaxation of a plasmoid train, again comet, which excited Jupiter's magnetic field and induced excessive plasma generation. We're going to see all of this in just a minute. And its release in the same manner as if it was sunspots, solar coronal holes. Literally, Jupiter blasted out energy as if it was a star when it got hit by this comet. It's totally incredible. We're going to see how big of a release this was. Inducing the appearance of a radiation belt that is brightening in the decimeter band between 13.2 and 36 centimeters, and that might sound boring, but wait till you see this thing. and the appearance of large auroral anomalies and a change of the Jupiter Io system of currents. So this radiation belt, visible burst of energy, this huge loop of energy, two of them that come out of the planet after it gets hit by the comet. Let's keep reading. And then he puts in this update note about the plasma tube I was just talking about. This is in November 97 after he'd originally written the paper. A stream of ionized hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, etc., is being directed to Jupiter from the volcanoes of Io through a flux tube at 1 million amps. That would be more than enough energy to run everything we've got on Earth. It's tremendously, especially if it's sustaining and ongoing, instead of just one big burst. And it was ongoing. The volcanoes. So right there, we're seeing that there's something wrong with the conventional model because, wait a minute, volcanoes are supposed to be just the result of lava. They're supposed to be the result of magma spinning. How the heck are we getting volcanoes becoming the source of plasma tubes? Well, we get back to the idea of what is a volcano. Volcanoes are ultimately hyperdimensional upwellings. They're caused by this greater geometric energy that is swirling around, and it's the swirling that is pushing the magma underneath to cause that volcano to form. So because that swirling is there, that rotation is also causing electromagnetic charge, and it's bleeding out into our reality from higher dimensions. So a volcano now has some very new and interesting properties, and it becomes electrically conductive. And this explains all kinds of stuff we're going to get into later about earthquake fault lines and volcanic ridges where you see these strange earth lights and all sorts of bizarre, inexplicable in the mainstream model phenomena that take place in these areas. It's all getting back to this plasma and torsion phenomenon that we're talking about. Let's go on. A 1 million amp flux tube is affecting the character of Jupiter's magnetic process and intensifying its generation of plasma. And then he's citing a study where this came from. Earth and Universe, number 3, 1997, from NASA data. Okay, so now I want to actually go into Shoemaker-Levy 9. You can take a look at it. You can see what the heck happened, because a picture's worth 1,000 words, and not only do we have pictures, we have movies, and it's going to be awesome. So let's take a look. This is one of the original photos of the comet after it had gotten stuck in Jupiter's gravity, and it starts looping around, and it looks like it's going to collide with Jupiter. It broke up into all these pieces, and then they got names, as you can see right here, actually just letters. So the letters, of course, correspond to which fragments we have, and some of them got skipped over, as you can see there. There's no J, there's no I, etc. So some of them might have just winked out of existence. And it's more than 9 pieces, but you get the gist of it from what we're looking at here. Now, this is one of the NASA animations of, it's not really an animation, this is an illustration of how they expected that this comet was going to hit Jupiter, because they could plot out the orbit, and they were pretty sure about where it was going to go. And now we have a NASA animation, very low resolution for the Internet of the Era, of this thing hitting the planet Jupiter. Here we go. So you see these fragments coming in, and boom, they start crashing in one at a time. This is the approximate area where they expected it was going to happen. They had no idea what this was going to do once it hit. And then, sure enough, these areas show that there was an awesome disruption to the cloud deck of Jupiter in its south pole, where a lot of these hits took place. It created huge scars in the actual external appearance of the planet Jupiter. And then in this next view, that's in ultraviolet, even the visible light spectrum, as you can see, had stunning black spots that appeared where the comet hit. But in the ultraviolet spectrum, it was far, far bigger and more impressive. Now, when we get into infrared, that's when things really get exciting, because there was way, way, way more heat generated in Jupiter from these comet hits than they ever expected would happen. And you're going to see that in this NASA clip coming up here. The scientists were totally stunned because these hot spots were not explicable in the mainstream model. That's Dmitriev's point. It's because you have an electrical charge in that comet, and then there's so much energy in Jupiter itself that it's like this massive energetic surge is taking place. It can't be explained in the conventional model, but yet it happened. So that's exciting because it validates this idea that there's something bigger going on in our solar system than just what we were expecting from conventional models. Let's keep going. You see these huge, huge hotspots, and then that one up at the top left is another comet hit that also was a hotspot. Here's another photograph of all these comet hits, and then here again is another shot of hits at the lower level and then hits even above the equator taking place. And now we have this one. So now we're looking at Jupiter rotating, and in the infrared range there's these huge hotspots from where it was struck, and they're just beaming, they're glowing, they're so bright. It's incredible. And then we also have this. Now this is a film from, it seems like it's BBC. And I found this on the internet just recently when I was putting this together for you. And they talk about everything that took place and how excited the scientists were. Let's take a look.
The shoemaker Levy collided with the planet. Larger explosions are expected later this week.
They called it the biggest explosion in the solar system for hundreds of years. Half an hour after the first comet fragment went in, the impact was still visible. The cloud of debris spread out for thousands of miles and was over 1,000 miles high. The astronomers were jubilant.
We're going to see things and we're going to learn a lot. That's the good news tonight.
Now we got the animation. Now right after this we're going to see it gets really good because they show you all these infrared hits, and it is pretty stunning what we're going to see right here. That's the first film. Then there's another one which is even more impressive. Okay, so we can clearly see that some very intense activity took place here. And I also have this for you, which is in the aftermath of the comet hitting. You can see that there are still big marks, and there's still this glow at the polar regions. So in the short time left that I have for this episode, I want to show you the tube that was created, because I teased it, and it's probably better that I not keep teasing you week after week after week. We'll get to this. So on August 28th, 2004, at the Bay Area International UFO Expo up in San Francisco area, California, I first presented this information to the public, and now whatever it is, 13 years later, I'm finally putting it into my show. Let's take a look. This is an animation of the flux tube that appears between Jupiter and its moons. Now, these loops that were there actually are the flux tubes, and you're going to see that even better in our next slide right here, where this is something that normally is not visible to us. But then when these comet fragments hit Jupiter, it suddenly lit up and started glowing, exactly conforming with Dmitriev's model of this highly charged solar system. So here again is a shot of the hits on Jupiter, the impacts that took place, and this is a closer view of some of those shots as we were seeing before. July 17th, July 29th and 30th, it's still very visible, and this is what was so unbelievably amazing. 45 minutes after the K fragment hit the planet, this is a visible view, a real photo of these loops of plasma that blasted out of the planet. It's quite stunning. And then take a look at this. This was also something they totally did not expect, that right as the fragment hit, and you can see there during, and it's right during this period of July 17th, thereabouts, 1994, there is this huge X-ray flash. This again, in the middle there, where it's yellow and red, nobody expected anywhere near that much energy to happen when Shoemaker-Levy 9 hit Jupiter. And I'll show you a couple more pictures in the short time we have here. There's the loop again, the plasma loop, one of the two that became visible. There was one of them that lasted longer than the other one. And that was a big, big surprise to everybody. And this is a NASA illustration showing us what happened here. The one last thing I want to say about this is something that I got from Richard C. Hoagland. He covered Shoemaker-Levy 9 soon after it happened. Actually, as it was happening, he was covering it, but then he wrote about it afterwards. Remember that in Arthur C. Clarke's movie 2010, Jupiter explodes and becomes a new sun. And in the book 2010, which I read when I was in like 5th grade, he says, oh, we had to call it Lucifer. But it's their religion, right? It's the religion that he apparently was believing in. So the idea here is that the people in the secret space program very likely steered that comet into Jupiter, hoping that the hydrogen gas inside its atmosphere would ignite and it would blow up like a bomb and prove the theory that they put out in 2010, namely that there would be a second sun and that the moons of Jupiter would start to melt and the ice would become water and we would then have habitable worlds. And this was actually from Hoagland's Top Insider, this guy that we're now calling Bruce. He's the one who told me this, and he apparently had told Hoagland that back then as well. They really did hope that they could just get the whole planet to blow up and turn into a star because they knew there was all this heightened energy in our solar system and they wanted to try to jumpstart the process. Now back then, the idea that we would have had the ability to steer a comet with spaceships or something, it didn't even seem plausible. But after all that I've learned since then and all you've seen on Cosmic Disclosure, now it makes sense. In the next episode, we're going to be back with even more of Dr. Alesky Dmitriev's stunning examinations of interplanetary climate change, and if I have time, we're going to start to get into some of the further validation that I did with my own research, because this is not just Russian science. I ended up going back in 2004 for 4 solid months and validating this scientifically. That's coming up next time on Wisdom Teachings. I'm your host, David Wilcock, and I thank you for watching.